Good. This is like a new style for me. Super bedhead. It's beyond bedhead. It takes a longer time to make this hair than normal bedhead. You have to spend hours rolling around in bed for this. Many hours. I have a strange mix of questions and comments. they're they're pretty disconnected, but that's okay. Some of these I'm going to answer today in more depth in our weekly support call. So just reminding you that every week until it doesn't happen anymore, at 7 a.m. Pacific, we have a Zoom call. So anyone from the public is invited, but I do ask for people to have like a basic understanding of reverse inquiry, utility inquiry, and mining, or at least reverse and utility inquiry from the Kiloby inquiries. That way, in the meeting, we can all speak the same language, so that if I refer to either one of those tools, you'll know what I mean. So it's like everyone's invited, but please have that basic tool set. And that's a lot like it's going to be for when we get to the new site. So in a few weeks, we're going to launch a new site on the internet that isn't associated with Facebook or any of the usual social media outlets. This will be a new site without the baggage for those other ones. And that will function a lot like Facebook in the sense that you can interact with people, me, facilitators, through video, commenting, posting, meetings, like meetings where you just get together, people get together. There are also meetings where they're led by a facilitator. Here's an interesting thing that we're developing for that site is a way that where you can sit at home and I facilitate you through inquiry. And what it would be is like whatever's coming up for you, like if you have words or some image or memory of something happened coming up in your awareness, you would click words on the screen. There'll be a place for words. And then I come on and I talk about how to be with that and investigate that. And then what might come up is feeling. I'm feeling a lot right now. Click on the screen and then I talk to you about that. How to mind that, how to, this thing about this inquiry takes some skill. Even when, if you think of Raman as who am I inquiry, there's still some skill in that. You have to know what it is that he was doing, how he was asking questions, and how he was looking. There's a basic skill level. So, because there are certain people have said, look, if I have to learn a skill to be myself, to be more fully myself, what's the point? Think of it this way, though, and it might make sense. This ignorance that we've taken ourselves to be, these words, pictures, feelings, and sensations, which we've identified with as human beings, there are again layers of that. And it's not just like one thought that I'm a self. There's a bunch of different stories and programs. Some of it's held in the body. We have unconsciousness and repression, right? So essentially, even if you don't do work on deeply unconscious traumas or emotional repression, even Eckhart talks about how the ego is unconscious. So the ego is unconscious. The ego activity is largely unconscious. So you would have to have tools. Many people would have to have tools just to unearth the unconsciousness because our natural way of being is unconsciousness. Something new has to come in. Now, that something new, obviously, ultimately is awareness. Awareness, it becomes more obvious as you hang around these teachings, but as that awareness is becoming more obvious as your true nature, the entanglement of the words, pictures, and feelings and sensations, especially the really emotional stuff, you benefit from being able just to look at that with some skill. So we took Ramanu's Who Am I, which requires some skill, and what we think we did is we created a 2.0 version for it that includes the somatic. So you have to learn a skill. So those skills would be necessary. I'm not going to say necessary, but I encourage you before you start attending the weekly meetings to learn those basic skills. But when we get on the new site, there are going to be plenty of opportunities to learn those. And the more you learn in KI, the more you'll want to go deeper into that new site, because the deeper into it you go, you'll see us talk more and more about, how do I say this? When you first go to the site, you'll see it's very simple. The first tier is very simple. It's just awareness, awareness talk, awareness pointing, resting as awareness, and noticing, being awake to phenomena that comes across awareness, happens to awareness. As you dig deeper in, you're going to see where the tools come in. As you other tiers on the site, the tools get taught, and we're talking about the tools, and then we're showing you how to use them interactively. And it goes all the way up to where you can become um, a certified facilitator. So everything's going to be on that site. Everything you want with regard to KI is going to be there. We've never had anything close to that. So that's very exciting. That's why I keep talking about it. It's something that's been brewing for quite a while for me. I just keep thinking something new is happening here. And here we are at the birth of it. So this is great. You guys come on over for the birth of it. I feel like I'm having morning coffee with my friends. All 5 of my friends. There'll be more friends later, but I won't be here. I'm just looking through a couple questions that I've gotten, and I'm trying to find out which one is appropriate for this and which ones are appropriate for the meeting that we're about to have in a few minutes. So here's a little teaser for the meeting. If you want to go to the meeting, go to my Facebook page, my public page, and you'll see at the very top, I just posted it, a link to this meeting that's going to happen at 7 a.m. Pacific, which is in about 50 minutes from right now. One of the topics I'm going to get into there is, for those who are doing anger repression work, that's embodiment. So anger was repressed for them, and it's now coming online through our inquiries. We'll talk about, again, in maybe a more personal way, is this about expressing anger? Am I telling people to express anger? Where does expressing anger or not expressing anger in life, where does that fit into all this? I may say some of it today here, but the bigger part of that conversation will probably happen there. Another thing I'm going to talk about there is trauma commands, because this is something that when you first start doing KI, until you've gone deep into the somatic, you may not know this, or you may not have discovered this, but deep in our body are commands velcroed to rather physical sensations, physical feeling sensations. These commands can range from anything from get away to get off of me, stop, don't, I can't, I won't, never, always. It could be any word or words together, but they're like core concepts that we really hook into. So even if you have this story that comes up, it's what we're talking about is something within that. If you have like a short phrase, like I don't know, I'll never find love. We're talking about the concepts within that sentence that are really velcroed to the body, and we're learning how to unvelcro that, which is very helpful. Because have you ever seen thoughts that persistently arise to awareness? I'm sure you have. It's like the same one keeps coming through. Well, when you get to this level, you ain't seen nothing yet, because at that level, when you tap into that, it's like a constant. And this has been going on your whole life. This is what you'll discover, that deep in your body, there are these stories, programming that are happening, and we just don't know about it. It's unconscious. So when we do the deep somatic work and we listen sort of in the right way with the right questions, we discover these commands. And I call them commands because they feel that way. It doesn't seem like just a story or a concept. It's like a command to you to do something, or other people to do or not do something. And it's like a broken record, because it's trying to protect you. So it has to keep going so that you'll keep it in consciousness, even if you're not aware of it. So it's always there, so that you'll stay away from certain situations that are scary, not say or do things that will create pain or suffering or something for you. So it's very intelligent. But at this stage of our lives, when we are the trauma commands that are running in the background, we're not fully conscious of it. They are coming with, or they have developed with very painful contractions or chronic pain. So that's the rub right there. Even though these little commands have been helpful to protect us through the years, and we don't know that they're there, we may have an inkling, but we have no idea until we go deep in it. And there they are, persistent little suckers. The one that I talk about was get away, but there was another one which was, if I can remember it, very persistent trauma command deep in the spine. While the healing of the pain was happening, I encountered, it's right on the tip of my tongue. Um, oh, I have to hold back. So you can imagine with repression, there's a command to hold back. Now, so that kind of story, if it's a trauma command, is not something that just arises and falls and you go, oh, isn't that interesting? That thought was there. It's not like that at all. It's like constant. It's repetitive and it's persistent and it's unconscious. So you're walking around Earth not knowing that it's there running, and then you become aware that it's there running. So I'm going to show you how to meet that and see the emptiness of that. I'm going to talk about it in the meeting. Super helpful, because if that's running, remember that's running like here, it's already connected to something somatic for you, a body contraction or pain. So you know that tightness that you keep feeling or that clenched stomach that you notice even despite all your clarity and or your deepening or whatever you call it. That's what I'm talking about. Connected to that for a lot of people are these little commands, programs running. And we just have to discover what it is for you, because in discovering it, you can have some somatic freedom there. That you can start to feel dissolution of that sensation. But how is that going to dissolve if you've got a very persistent story connected to it or a command that you haven't even discovered yet? So let's talk about that. Just give you a little glimpse. When I first discovered hold back, it came first as a sentence like, you have to hold back anger, aggression, whatever, in order to get love, approval, whatever, safety. It came as that, but then it was just a hold back. So that was a command. And I just stayed with that and stayed with that. So you can imagine how that plays into repression and all of that. But then seeing the emptiness of that had a drastic impact on my body in a good way. Okay, somatic freedom is what I'm talking about there. Somatic embodiment. Nothing else to say about that right now. Let me also say this is something that I can talk about publicly, because the stuff that I'm talking about in these meetings and that I'll talk about on the new site, that stuff's going to be really experiential. Like it's how to. Basically, the how to is going to be there. So if you're listening to me, this is just context so that you're not let down. Go to Eckhart and the other folks or other teachers who do experiential work on YouTube. For the experiential work here is going to be on that site so that we can support people, because as we've seen on here, some stuff can come up and people don't know how to navigate it, which brings me to the topic of trajectory. So just a reminder, think about it this way. When you're doing deep somatic work, there's like a healing process that's happening. You could call it anything you want, embodiment. But there's a sense that the body is becoming lighter and lighter, and more abiding as awareness. But along the way, all kinds of things come up and can even overtake us for a while. Like we're really caught in something, boss says something or friend, and suddenly we're in this trigger that is really strong and feel it in the body. And then in those moments, you can lose sight of what's happening for you and think, oh, I've regressed. I'm believing this still. Just understanding that the awakening to awareness is immediate. So, in other words, pointing to awareness is right here, right now. It's already awake. Can you recognize that which is already awake? Being aware of being aware. All those pointers, immediate. You can't find it in time. If you search for it in time, you'll miss it. It's right here. This. But the embodiment is an unfolding. That is not like you're going to just recognize awareness in your body is necessarily going to empty itself of all held, everything held from the past. That's more like a trajectory, falling away. So when you're experiencing that, those moments of being doubled over in a trigger or in something, that's just what's happening along the way. That, especially with skill, will resolve itself. And it may come back again because healing doesn't happen in a straight line. You know, the metaphor of like going up the mountain, the healing. This is the embodiment process, not awake to awareness. That's immediate. I'm talking about the embodiment of that recognition where you bring it into the body fully. The body has all the past stuff, wounds, traumas, programs. So that unfolds at that level is going to happen more like in a trajectory or not in a straight line. There's a good metaphor of the mountain where you're headed up the mountain. This is just a metaphor. And see, as you circle around, you may come back to some of the same wounds or triggers before that's resolved. So that's before going up the mountain. If you don't understand that, you might get confused as to what's happening as you circle back to a similar trigger and it's happening again. It's mostly body. It's the body's keeping the score. So the trigger, the mind has unconscious thoughts too. It's body and mind. But when you go into inquiry, you see how much is stored with the body sensations. So that's still there. And so you circle back around to the same trigger because it's still there. So you can see why I'm talking about embodiment now, because otherwise you just loop like this forever. You just keep getting triggered on the same thing, and there's no moving up the mountain metaphorically. You're stuck. But even when you're not stuck, there's a trajectory that is not a straight line. So you may have to feel some triggers a few times and take a look at that and circle back to things before you're able to move through a lot of that. And that's just experience, guys. That is not conjecture. That is me working with people for, every day for many years, watching that. So I'm just reporting it to you. When it comes to awakening to awareness, don't accept anything about time in that. Like, it's immediate. Pointing to what's already awake is immediate. This is something different. And being able to hold that paradox is important. As you recognize the non-dual nature of reality, being able to hold paradox becomes natural. The paradox is that we're waking up to awareness, which is immediate, already here. Can't find it in time. Can't find it in past or future. It's what's awake now. This is it. That, with the paradox of the embodiment process, is an unfolding. So being, becoming, or unbecoming, as I say, both of those things at once, paradox. If your mind starts to argue with that, chances are it can't quite hold paradox, still very strongly in the dualistic thing. Like it has to be this or that. It can't be both. So look at that, because it is. And a lot of other paradoxes are held in this. Like, just let me talk about that for a second, because the mind wants to say either there's relative reality and things are separate or distinct, or there's absolute where none of that exists. And the mind, even if it's had glimpses of what it's speaking about, it's still getting tripped up though, because it can't hold the paradox. It's still either or. Dualistic mind is like it's either this or it's that. But then that breaks down and you see, no, it's both at once. Can't understand it, but it is. It's crocked that way. That there is the absolute where nothing exists and there's no self, and it's all illusion. And relatively, the appearances appear to give the appearance of duality, and there's conventional reality and all of that. So just there's other paradoxes, but be looking for that. I want to create an inquiry for being able to hold paradox. We probably already have it, actually, just haven't turned it towards that. All right. Oh, and then I made a post on Facebook. Do I want to talk about this now? Yeah, made a post on Facebook, and someone asked me last night, in person actually, someone that I'm around physically here, had seen the post and said, um, they reposted it, but they were making sure about what it is that I meant. So the post is, I'll just show it to you. It's likely to trigger some people, especially someone who really holds on to conspiracy theories and things. But it's this picture. Even if you're not conspiracy minded, something in your soul has to be telling you something isn't right with any of this. So then I wrote, and I have no idea what the sign was referring to. I wrote, "This is fascinating because as far back as I can see in our history, humans have felt like something isn't right about themselves, others, the world. The more interesting question to me is how much longer will we continue to miss the solution? When we truly see that the world is a reflection of our consciousness, that world will be transformed in ways that we can't imagine. Until then, we hold up signs and continue in the nightmare that the world is inherent and real, somehow divorced from our thoughts, feelings, and sensations about the world. Conspiracy theories, whether relatively true or not, don't get a get out of jail free card. It's all illusion, period. For a long time, because of how J. Krishnamurti spoke, I didn't understand what he meant by the observer and the observed are one or are not separate until I started to see the insight. This is how, regardless of what he meant, here's how I see it, my own experience. Whatever world that I see out there, with whatever I see going on, is first and foremost, I can only experience it through my own thoughts, feelings, and sensations. One way that you know this for sure is if you just stop thinking for a moment. If you're able to just turn the mind off and be here. Just let's do this. It's important because otherwise we're going to be trying to understand this through the mind. So just rest here with me. Quietly use whatever portal or pointer works for you just to have at least a short moment here of no thought, pure awareness, just for a few seconds even. So when you settle into that recognition, even if it's only for a few seconds, or if it's the way that you live, essentially, where you can just experience that pure presence anytime you want. Notice that in this moment when there's no thinking, you have no sense of a world out there. Like you literally have to start thinking again to know that there's a New York City Republican Party or even another person or a person. To know yourself as an individual self, you have to think thoughts. I, me, mine, and other thoughts. These are all, so our access to these objects in the world, no matter what the object is, any object in the world, our only access to it is through thinking, feeling, and sensation, too. Now, you live your whole life identified with thinking, words and pictures, feelings and sensations, and you say you don't have any point of reference. So then you don't see that the world out there is a product of what you're thinking and feeling. You don't see that, so it looks inherently real, and that is scary. So it's like being tripped up on your own shadow. It's like walking, down a hallway or something by yourself, and suddenly you see a shadow and you're like, that's real. Like I didn't produce that, or that didn't get produced from here. That's independent, and it's scary. But then suddenly you recognize, no, that's actually that's a shadow. That's See that what that is, and then you're not scared anymore, and you're transformed because you were really scared because you misunderstood it, misperceived it, but now in perceiving it correctly, you're not afraid anymore. So it's not unlike that for the whole world. So we sit here, what world do you dream up? Like, what is your world? And you'll see that they see at least a slightly different world. In most cases, we just see different worlds. And what we see, if you want to break it down, is instead of just saying thoughts, it has to do with our genetics. It has to do with our upbringing, like how we were conditioned. It has to do with our history, our culture, the region where we live, what nation, if any, that we live in, our education, our language. But that shows up in interior awareness as thinking, even if it's influenced by all these things. So it shows up as thinking. So the world that we see is a product of that. There is no inherent world out there. So it's like we're looking at our own shadows, reflections of our own consciousness. So when we see, I've said this before, it's easy to see, like, well, I don't know about easy, but why did people fight over Trump so much? It's because everybody saw a slightly different Trump. If you're the kind of that's aware of narcissism or some of the psychology of trauma, you might have seen him a certain way, like, oh, he's just traumatized and narcissist or something. But if that's not your education or your background, then you might see him a different way. You might even like him, because you part of the thinking is whether you are a Republican identity or a Democrat or independent. So everybody was seeing a slightly different Trump, and then those who the reflection was a good thing, they grouped together and become Trump supporters, and the ones that whose reflection was a negative thing, they grouped together. But a lot of what's going on is many of them just misunderstood or misperceived the experience of thinking that there's just a Trump out there existing on his own, apart from thinking, feeling, and sensing. But again, if you go quiet for a moment, like quiet mind, pure presence for one moment, no evidence of anything like that, of anything separate. There's not anything arising in pure awareness. So the world is not known, let alone what a Trump is. But even as we start to experience, oh, but there is a Trump there, we sometimes forget we're thinking in that moment. It's not like pure awareness just finally sees what's really out there. There isn't anything out there inherently. Subtle thinking starts to arise and we get fooled. Even those of us who sit in meditation or live in awareness, you can get fooled if you don't see the mechanism of thought coming up and how it informs what you're seeing. Because then you again forget that. You forget that there's thinking happening. So whatever shadows you see out there, you just think that they're inherent and real, like they have nothing to do with what you think. And that's the ignorance. So when people are making all these statements about, oh, the world's really fucked up now, it's like, if you look at history, humans have been doing this for a long time. That something is fucked up around them in their tribe, their neighbor, their town, their city, their nation, within their political party. Look at history. Like, people have been thinking the world needs, they've been thinking what they've been thinking. There have been wars, terrorism, all sorts of things that we've seen because of how people misperceive reality. This has been going on for as far back as the fact that now we have conspiracy theories is just more of the same. So I'm not talking about whether something is relatively true. Someone might say, well, I have evidence that something is really happening. Fine, we should explore that. We should explore things that we can verify, truly verify. But just because you're thinking that what you're thinking is true just because you're thinking it. Like, that's the misperception. It takes a lot more discernment in that for us to transform. But what I'm saying is first have what we're trying to do is like there's a bunch of shadows out there that are projections of our own consciousness. And then we're going out to them and treating them as if they're not projections of our own consciousness and trying to fix it, not recognizing we are the projector. So there's a projector here projecting a movie screen, and then the projector tries to change the movie as if it's not projecting it. You see, so if we shift to see this, like this is why I say noticing thoughts is important and being with feelings, because it's not just about recognizing pure awareness where all of that is seen to be illusory. It's also the insight that when the world appears, as it appears, again, it's a product of words, pictures, feelings, and sensations. And that is a very valuable insight to see essentially how we're creating the world in every moment with our thinking. But when we recognize the observer and the observed are one, that the projector in the movie, the shadow experience, when we see that that's what's going on, that will transform each of us. If those who see this, it will transform the way you see the world for sure. And all I'm saying is that if enough people on earth begin to recognize this, there could be some real transformation that happens. But until then, and I think this is the bigger picture on awakening, truly, we awaken for personal reasons, right? Because we're suffering. But once you start to see this, you see that this is bigger than you. Um, this kind of thing can transform our world. And so I posted something else on Facebook about that. Once you see that you're doing the projecting, then how are you going to argue as much with your own projections? That's going to be silly at that point. Like, I can't believe my projection did this. Well, you thought it, of course, it did that. Like you're buying into the whole thing. It's all part of your drama. So you're dancing with your own shadows or fighting with them. So I wrote someone else's quote, which speaks to this transformation, which is imagine how the world will change when humanity realizes its interconnectedness with all of life and works together to restore the health and well-being of the whole. I don't know how to pronounce this. Nassim? I don't know this person. Nassim. Some of you are going to be like, you don't know him? I don't know him or her. Haramein. But the reason that I like that, the interconnectedness is not the word that I would use. I would see everything as a reflection of our own consciousness. And it's interconnectedness. There's literally, you are it. You're not connected to the world or to others. You are that in a literal sense. That the reflection that you see, the observed and the observer are one. That's the non-dual. I am that. So that's more than just a feeling of, oh, we're all interconnected. I'm not saying he's saying that, but let's be very clear here that we're not talking about sitting around in a circle feeling connected and singing kumbaya, although that may happen. I'm saying something, a deeper realization can happen where you literally see what you're observing is a product of what you're thinking, feeling, sensing. No separation really. So that, how could that not transform our world if more and more people saw that? Someone also spoke to me. There was a long email about death. Yeah, I am sharing deep things here, but it's all viewable. It's all available to us, even though it's deep. And the path that we've put forth with the Kiloby inquiries is a path to that because there's the recognition of awareness in that. We all know that, and that's the foundation for this, a foundation for this realization. And then we're literally seeing, if you can tell, one of the things you're seeing in KI, for example, is that all these stories that seem like there's a you there, they're just words and pictures. Or others, like dad is a or sets of words and pictures and feelings and sensations. So you're seeing it. Every time you look in awareness, you're seeing that you don't experience people or objects. You experience words and pictures connected to feelings and sensations. You don't experience an object, a separate object in your awareness. You only experience this. So if you hang out in that realization long enough, you start to see all the objects in the world are known and experienced only through the Velcro effect, body-mind connection, words, pictures connected to feelings and sensations. So you're already seeing it even if you haven't had kind of that ultimate insight around it. All right, switching gears to death. So like I said, I had a long email from someone who lost someone close to them. And the way that they were explaining their life is that they had built up their whole life around the fear of losing people because they had abandonment trauma. So the idea of losing a parent or losing a friend was catastrophic to their thinking. So they were always worried about it. And then someone close to them died and very distraught over that. I'm not going to give any words of comfort here because that's what everybody else around you is doing. What I would say is let this whole thing around death for you be an invitation to deeper inquiry. I clearly saw in the non-dual realization that we don't die. There's no self to die. So when you really recognize that, your fear of death can finally go away. And that's so important to life because the fear of death, you can see how in a magnified way, this person was suffering over the fear of death, having to do with abandonment. But many of us fear our own death or the death of others. And if death isn't real in the way that you think, so in other words, what we're really afraid of is the death of the ego, the death of my story. But in awakening, we see through that story. So it's like to die before you die. To die before you die then leaves you here not afraid of your physical death in the same way. Or the physical death of others. The physical death. Because remember, when we're dying, what we're afraid of, or as death approaches, what we're afraid of is the end of our story. See, the story ends. But if the story isn't what we are, then what, if anything, really ends on death at the time of death? If you're in awareness when you're dying and you're not identifying with the story, what is it that dies? So you could say the body and mind, but that's the body and mind. See, even those are concepts. What is it that really dies? See, the entire fear of death is wrapped up into ego, is what I'm saying. So just do the work and you'll see it. Like, it's really hard to understand it intellectually. But it shows up as the fear of death is gone. Preoccupation with death is gone. And it's like a seeing that death is just part of it all. Like the apparent death is just part of it. And life continues, apparently, with every death. But when you're believing in the ego and the ego is being like that's who you are, then every death seems like a really important bad thing. It doesn't mean you won't grieve because the bonds with people closest to you that's held in the body, you're going to grieve, but it's not the same. Death is not the same from the recognition of what you really are. And then here's my last question, and we're getting close to again, I want to invite you, before I answer this last one's about having fun and enjoying life. It's a good one to leave you with. Just remember every couple of things, every Saturday morning, again at 7 a.m. Pacific, which is in about 15 minutes, we do an interactive call, weekly support call. And these are anyone from the public or people that I work with in sessions, they come just to check in with me and with each other and share where they are in their process doing this work, being supported, asking questions, sharing insights, seeing that other people, it's really nice to see that other people see the same things that you see. So when they go into inquiry, to listen to someone else say, oh, yeah, this came up for me. And you just hear that, plus hearing how someone saw through that, that's helpful. It really is to be around like minded people and just to feel that resonance and being in a group of people who are looking in this way. So come join. And then I'll also want to remind you, I'll probably keep doing this for a while. We're landing on a new site on the internet. Like I said in the beginning, please stay tuned because what you might notice if you don't follow us there is that I just don't show up on YouTube as much. Or Facebook, you'll just see me conspicuously absent. I'll pop in every now and then and remind you that we're over here doing work. And I'll invite you over there, but you're not going to see me here every day for sure. Okay. Funny stories. I popped on Facebook Live and I hadn't been on there for a while on my main page. And a guy came up and he said, how do I get you off of my screen? And I thought, well, you don't click on the link first. But then a bunch of people came in sharing about the inquiry and realizing that we were engaging in some interactive process. And he just clicked out of it. But that's what I mean. Like when some level of knowing how to use our basic skills is like a language that we speak with each other. And once you know that language, we can go really deep together. But if you don't know that language, it feels like what is this? What's he talking about? So in order to not have that experience of like, I don't know what he's talking about, learn these basic skills and come join me. The basic skills are reverse inquiry, utility inquiry, and mining. Once you know those three, the conversation, you'll catch on to what we're saying. Okay, so the question was like, I don't know, I've answered this before, but I think that people are concerned about that they won't be able to have fun anymore if they awaken, or that, because there's a sense of I'm going to lose myself. So those aspects of yourself that brought you fun or enjoyment are somehow going to be lost, and frankly, some of it will. To be right honest with you, I don't know what's going to happen for you, but I don't sit there and listen to. I like love songs, love them. I like songs that are obviously about ego, that have a lot of drama in them. My mind doesn't identify with them anymore, so it's more of a visceral experience to listen to music. Like you can feel it in your whole body and like a heart resonance. But one thing I lost was the capacity to listen to those words and go, oh, yes, I sing it, sister. Like, I know that pain. I feel that pain. So you can lose some of those things. Do I have fun? Absolutely. These last 3 years, strangely, even though had been in massive pain, have been the funnest years of my life. And I could say that it's because I'm with Chester. I'm in a good relationship with someone that I really love, but frankly, a lot of it has to do with inquiry. Because remember that I wasn't aware of a joy repression. So along with the anger repression, I had experienced joy, but there was still some block around it. So with the anger repression, I saw a story that I can't express or feel joy because I'd always been rewarded by being serious. So as an attorney, as a young kid, I was like the serious, contemplative, like dorky kid who, while the other kids were out doing what they were doing, I was sitting on the back of a car, maybe with a friend, just contemplating the cosmos and how, what is it that we are? I mean, that was the kid that I was. Um, so being serious seemed to be built into my personality, which is fine. I like that side of myself, being an attorney, very serious, and then rewarded for it. The more serious I am in the courtroom, the more my clients would like me. So subtly or not so subtly, the joy repression. If you have not done KI on joy repression, like, go do it immediately. What are you waiting on? Because if there's repression of joy, wouldn't you want to know that? And wouldn't you want to lift it up? So as that has been lifted more and more, even more enjoyment of life. I don't know what to say because it's someone saying, do you have fun in life? It's like, well, of course. Like, yes. Like, this is fun. We do also a lot of fun things. I just think people are concerned for no reason. Like, they're worried. If you'll just look at the worry about it. Look at the thoughts that say, see, this idea that you're going to lose something can stop you. It can stop you from going deeper. Just inquire into it and inquire into joy repression. I wouldn't be doing any other thing if I had a choice. Like, that's how much I'm enjoying my life. There's nothing else that I'd want to do than exactly what I'm doing right now. How much more could you possibly enjoy life than that? Does it get better than that? I don't know. How would it get better when you're doing exactly what you want to do in every minute? It's beyond joy. There's no word for that. I think I'm done. Let's see. Uh, One other thing is a client yesterday said in the middle of a session, like, KI takes the mystery out of suffering. I put that on Facebook. That's really poignant because so many of us suffer and we don't know why. Like, we know that something happened to us when we were kids, some trauma or something, or we know that we believe this about ourselves, or we know these things, but it's somewhat still a mystery until there's an awakeness that goes in with skill, bringing skill in with you, and you see precisely why you were suffering. You find the memory and you find the programs and you feel the feeling. It all comes out of hiding. It's no longer a mystery then. So when things are unconscious, it's a mystery. You might have an inkling, but you can't fully see it all. And so it remains mysterious. And as it remains mysterious, which is unconscious, it perpetuates itself. And it is very mysterious. And you can spend like 10, 20 years on the path suffering because the suffering is still mysterious for you. It's like you can't get to the root of it. What we find in KI is it's all available to us. It's all viewable from awareness with the right skill, no longer a mystery. It's just like as simple as seeing a memory, like of the one I've shared with you already, seeing a memory of like the school library hiding from bullies. So if you're lucky, you get that much, but the rest remains a mystery. But you're suffering in some way, like pain or something connected to it. Again, KI takes the mystery out of it because it shows you exactly in that picture what you were believing, what assumptions and commands and stories, programs are there, and now you can see it all. And now that it's in consciousness, one, it's no longer a mystery, but two, once you can see it, you can start to see through it. If you can't see it, how do you see that you're not it? So that is one thing that KI does is it takes the mystery out of suffering, which is just another way of it saying it makes things conscious that were unconscious before. Come join me for the meeting and we'll go deeper into